Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Compassion in Therapy training series on compassion-based approaches for working with shame, co-produced by the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion and the Awake Network. For those of you who I'm just meeting, my name is Kaylee Isaacs. I'm the founder of the Awake Network, and it's my real pleasure to be here today for this live keynote session with Deb Dana and Chris Willard, exploring polyvagal theory and shame in therapeutic practice. It's been wonderful to see this inspired group of mental health professionals from over 90 countries around the world come together for this event. And so if you're tuning in now, go ahead and say hello. Let us know where you're joining from so we can get a sense of who's here as we land together. And just so everyone has an idea of what to expect for today, we're going to start out with Deb and Chris going into a brief discussion of the principles of polyvagal theory and how it relates to shame, before we move into a clinical demonstration with Deb and a volunteer client named Carly. The demonstration will be very full. It'll go for a full 45 minutes. And then after that, Chris will come back on to lead us in a follow-up conversation. And during the demonstration, we will be turning off the chat just to respect the container of Deb and Carly in that space together. And so Chris Willard is our host for today's session. Chris is a clinical psychologist, author, consultant, and teacher at Harvard Medical School. He's a TEDx speaker and author of 20 books. We feel very lucky to have Chris joining us for this event as a host for this session, as well as others. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Kaylee. And it's wonderful to be here with the Awake Network. It's wonderful to be here with my friend Deb Dana, who I now feel like through these interviews and getting to know each other in these past few years, it's always wonderful to be in Deb's presence. I feel calmer already and well-regulated already just being here with you, Deb. So I'm really excited to be with Deb Dana. Deb Dana is a clinician. She's a consultant, an author, a speaker, and a founding member of the Polyvagal Institute. Deb believes that we all benefit when we have a basic understanding of the ways that the nervous system works and learn how to become active operators of this essential system. She works tirelessly to bring her work to clinical and non-clinical arenas, which I think is actually particularly cool. We've got a lot on our agenda, so let's dive right in. Deb, how are you today?
I'm great. It's so fun to see you again. Really, and I agree. I think, our nervous systems know each other now, and it is just fun to be in this space together and see where we're going to go.
It really is, and online and in person, it's amazing how effective these practices can be, and this work can be even online. So polyvagal theory, a lot of people feel like that sounds very complicated. What I love about talking to you is you break it down so simply, and I'm hoping you can just give us a little introduction, a little outline to what this is.
Yeah, I'd love to. So polyvagal theory, developed by my dear friend, Stephen Porges, is a theory of how the autonomic nervous system works. And the autonomic nervous system is really where every life experience we have begins, which is why I think it's so important for us to understand how the system works. It's at the heart of our daily living. So there are three organizing principles that I like to talk about. And we'll see these in action in the demo with Carly. So it's neuroception, hierarchy, and co-regulation. And neuroception is a word that Steve created to really illustrate how the nervous system takes in information, right? Because perception involves the thinking parts of our brain, and neuroception is a below the level of conscious awareness experience. And that's really where the nervous system takes in information. Then we invite the brain to partner with our nervous system because we need perception to be folded into that neuroceptive experience so that we can actually do something with it. And neuroception, if we think for a minute, uses three pathways of listening. It's an inside, an outside, and a between pathway. So it listens inside, so it's listening right now to what's going on inside your body, my body, everybody who's listening. If we just take a moment and listen in, the nervous system is sending you information, right? And it's sending you cues of welcome, cues that feel safe, and cues of warning, things that feel a bit uneasy or unsafe. And that's what it's always doing. It's doing those two categories of safe, unsafe, or welcome and warn. So that's the inside. And then it's doing an environmental outside listening. So it's listening in the space that we're each in. And then it's listening outside. I'm in an upstairs room in my home, and it's listening outstairs, wondering if the gardeners and the lawn people are going to start making noise out there, right? We never know what's going to happen, right? That's sort of a warning that my nervous system is feeling. But it listens to the environment, and it takes in the sounds, the sights, the smells that feel safe and that feel a little unsafe. And then the between, which is what you and I were talking about earlier, it listens between nervous systems, right? And our nervous systems finally met in person this winter in Boston, right? We actually got to be, in a space together, nervous system to nervous system. But before that, we had gotten to know each other online, and you really can feel the safety and the connection, and you can build that relational pathway. So those are the ways the nervous system's always listening, micro moment to micro moment. And if we don't learn to pay attention, it simply does its thing in the background and brings us a response. And when we don't listen, sometimes the response feels crazy, right? Like I have no idea why that just happened, or why I just did that, or thought that, or said that. But it's because neuroception, it felt there was something dangerous or something safe, and then it enacts a response, right? So, and what it does, it leads us to that second organizing principle of hierarchy. Neuroception, when it feels, oh, this is a welcoming environment, this is a place I can enter into and feel safe, takes you to a place on the hierarchy called ventral, which is the part of your nervous system that helps you feel safe, organized, regulated, connected, communicate. You're ready to be in the world. So a neuroception of safety takes you to that place, right? And that's the place where we reach out, we can reach in, we can, feel compassion, right? Compassion is only available to us when we have enough of this ventral state alive and active in our system. It emerges from our biology, right? Compassion. Shame, is also a biological response, but when we are in this place of ventral regulation, we can bring curiosity and compassion to the shame that we're feeling, right? So we can see how important it is to be able to come to ventral and anchor there so that we can actually work with our shame, visit our shame safely and not get overwhelmed by it. So shame it brings up one of the two survival states. There's sympathetic fight and flight, which is where we go when we leave regulation. We first go to this sympathetic fight and flight, flooded with cortisol, adrenaline. You can feel that we all know what that's like, right? You can remember a time probably in the last day when you had a moment of that energy flooding you, right? I know I can, right? And then if that doesn't help us come back to regulation, we can fall to the bottom of the hierarchy, which is called dorsal. And dorsal is that place of despair, hopeless, give up, disconnect. And that's really the shame place. That's where shame lives. It lives in that dorsal experience because I am worthless, I am lost, I am abandoned. That's that shame experience. And then we think about it sympathetic, and we'll probably feel this in the demo with Carly. She and I talked about, how shame comes to life and for her, and what happens for many people is sympathetic, have to driven energy comes alive to keep us out of shame, right? So sympathetic is trying to make sure we don't drop into that place of despair and shame. And it does it through sometimes, behaviors, stories, beliefs that feel irrational, that feel like they're not in our best interest, but the nervous system is simply trying to keep us out of the worst place of despair and shame. So that's hierarchy. And then just to touch for a minute, the third organizing principle is co-regulation. This biological need we all have to feel safe in connection with another human, right? That's wired into our nervous system. And so when we're, working in a clinical way, it's our job to be a regulated, human to be in that ventral space so that we can then offer that co-regulating energy to our client. Right. If we expand that, I think it's our responsibility to be regulated whenever we can so that we can offer that to everyone around us. Right. Because the thing we know about that co-regulating experience is if I'm regulated and offer that to you, your system begins to be more regulated. And then we begin to do that dance back and forth of co-regulation.
Yeah. Beautiful explanation covering so much in 5 minutes. I'm always struck when every time I listen to you or Steve or anybody else talking about polyvagal, just the parallels that this has to explain whether it's conscious and unconscious drives and sort of, Freudian, traditions, or whether it's thinking about mindfulness, whether it's thinking about other sorts of self-regulation practices, self-compassion, as I know we heard more about yesterday. And just what a beautiful model this is, and so usable for clinicians, for clients. We could go in 1,000 directions. I want to make sure we do get to the demonstration. Before we get into the demonstration, can you share a little bit more about the polyvagal model of shame and how you think it can be best applied, and then we'll really start to see it in action.
Yeah, yes. I think what's interesting about looking at the biology of shame or the biology of compassion, right, is that it helps us understand that someone is in a shame response or a shame story, not because they've chosen to be there, but because their biology has taken them there. Right. The neuroception is one of overwhelmingly dangerous cues. And the nervous system takes us to dorsal disconnect, give up, despair. Right. And so if we're working with our own shame or with someone who is experiencing that shame story, we can't say, let's think of a different story, or let's think about this differently. Let's move you out of here, because the nervous system is saying it feels too dangerous. It's not that I don't want to work with my shame. It's that I'm unable in this moment. Right. And I think the reframing of not able rather than not willing is really helpful for all of us. Even if we think of self-compassion, I can be so self-critical, right? I have that self-critical energy that comes from sympathetic should, have to, why aren't you? All of those voices that come. Right. And when I head to that shame place, my sympathetic self-critical parts get very loud because they're trying to get me out of there. Right. Again, that's a loop we can get into. Shame, self-criticism, shame, self-criticism. And that's the nervous system trying to find the way to enough ventral regulation so that we can actually then look at shame, right? Be with rather than hijacked by. Right. And that's the power of ventral. Right. And that's why in our beginning work, when we're creating the foundation for working with clients with shame, we resource ventral. Right. Not because we don't want to go to the shame stories or the shame experiences, but because when we have enough of an anchor in ventral, we can safely revisit rather than relive. Right. So that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and really cultivating, strengthening that anchor. I think that's also just a wonderful way of seeing it. So before we dive right into this demonstration, and I want to thank Carrie for being courageous in doing this demonstration. She'll be on in just a moment. Anything else you want to share about what exactly we'll be doing, or maybe a bit about the personal profile map that?
Yeah, let me talk for a minute about personal profile map. Carly and I actually met 2 days ago, just so that this wouldn't be our first, nervous system to nervous system meeting. I sent her the personal profile map, which is where I always start when I'm working with someone. I want to get to know them through their nervous system first. And the personal profile map is a way for people to get to know their ventral, which is the regulated place, their sympathetic fight flight, and their dorsal disconnect disappear in a way that is out here rather than in here, right? So it's safe enough. It's a bit of a distance. So we're putting it on a map. And actually, I think everybody has a link to that PDF. I would encourage everybody to have fun exploring their own. That's the first step to befriending your nervous system, really, is to do this map and begin to get to know, oh, here's how my states come to life. So we're going to start, Carly and I are going to start by exploring what it was like for her to create hers, what she learned from it. And then we're going to go from there and explore her system a bit and see, how shame comes to life, see if we can safely dip in and explore shame and self-compassion, compassion.
I love this idea of getting to know someone's nervous system first, and getting to know our own nervous system first. With please find the PDF. I think they just dropped the link in. So we're going to welcome Carly to pop on in, and I'll slip out into the background. Thank you, Deb, and well, I see there's a lot of questions already coming in. We'll be doing some Q&A toward the end. Also, there's some really wonderful questions, so I know this will be a rich discussion. And thank you, Carly.
Great. All right.
Okay.
Hi, Carly.
Hi, Deb.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Yeah. So we just stop for a moment and just arrive together, I think, which is the nice way to let our nervous systems find their way into connection. Yeah. So I'm going to let you know that I'm anchored in ventral and sending you that ventral energy.
Thank you. I need it.
Yeah. Well, you're taking a lovely leap in doing this. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I will also reiterate, as we've said before, that we're going to follow your nervous system. And your nervous system is going to invite us to go where it feels safe enough in this moment to go. Right. And so that we always do that, but especially when you and I have only known each other for about 40 minutes and we're not in an ongoing relational connection. So, yeah. So just notice what's happening inside you right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of frenetic, fast energy happening.
Yeah. Is that sympathetically charged, anxious energy? Okay.
It's a little bit of anxious, a little bit of excited.
Great.
But probably more on the anxious side.
Yeah. All right. So let's just acknowledge that, right? You get your sympathetic nervous system is saying, if you listened in for a moment, what's it saying?
It's saying, hey, this is a scary thing you're doing. Don't forget.
Yes. Right. I mean, it wants to make sure you stay safe. Yeah. So it's saying, don't forget, this is a bit scary. Yeah. What do you want to say back to it?
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
I see you and I got you.
Yeah. What happens?
It's still there, but it's settled a little bit.
Yeah. So let it know we welcome it being there, because it's going to give us cues as to how fast or how intense, how deep to go. And we're going to follow it.
Yeah.
It has great wisdom for you. Yeah.
I can feel, just by acknowledging the wisdom piece, my shoulders have started to settle just a little bit.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And my breathing feels a little more full than it did.
Yeah. So you get a little more of that ventral experience active and alive in your system, along with the sympathetic. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah. So let's just spend another moment with sympathetic, right? And you can just acknowledge, some of the ways it has served you over your lifetime, right? You can do that internally if you want. Just send it some gratitude for the ways it's kept you safe. Yeah.
It's a little bit sad to do. It feels a little sad.
Yeah. Where did the sadness emerge from?
It was like a chest and a little bit of tears happening, like a welling in both areas.
Yeah.
And then it quickly went up here.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
good to live.
Moved right. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. So let's see if we can. I have your map here. Thank you for sending it
Yeah.
to me. I'm wondering because yeah, I'm wondering if we might look at the ventral vagal place for a moment and see if we can, come to anchor there so that we can really more deeply explore the others. And when you filled out your ventral section, were there things there that surprised you, things that you thought, oh, I knew that would be there? What happened when you did that section?
Mm,
You already mentioned your breath, which is lovely. You pay attention to your body, don't you?
yeah, yeah. Um, I think, a lot of it is things that I've really been paying attention to. I have a pretty strong meditation practice, so these are
Nice.
things I follow. I think it just brought me so much joy to be reminded of like the little things that can bring me joy.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
springtime has been really really cool for that because there's just like
Um,
joy around every corner. And when I can feel into that
yeah.
uh, ventral
Yeah.
place,
Yeah.
like sparks, little pieces of
Yeah. I call those glimmers.
Mm,
So
mhm,
you're having all these glimmers, these micro moments of ventral okayness. It's like a bird singing or the sun or a flower, whatever it is. And
mhm.
as you notice those, they begin to accumulate in your system, which is such a lovely thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's a glimmer that you noticed this spring? What's something that you would say, ooh, that's a glimmer?
Yeah, I was sitting on a hammock at my house, and I was FaceTiming with a friend, and there were just these like little, we have like a lot of cottonwood trees in Colorado. So there were these little like pieces of cotton that were just like floating
Mm,
in the breeze, and the sunshine was glistening on them in this like perfect way. And
beautiful.
there's this feeling of like, wow, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. It was
Mm.
amazing.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great statement too. I'm right where we're supposed to be. And your I am in the world is statements. The world is abundant and I am whole. It's a beautiful sense in ventral, right?
Yeah.
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 So let's anchor there for a moment, really let that fill you, right? Knowing that it's wired into your nervous system, this place, this place of regulation. And that even when we go to visit sympathetic and dorsal, you still have an anchor there in ventral. Yeah.
That's such a nice reminder. I
Mhm.
need that in my life. Yeah.
Yes, I think we all do nowadays, don't we? But yeah, it's nice to be reminded. If you go back to that ventral place for a moment
Mhm.
and just enter into that space, how does it come alive for you? I imagine it comes alive in your body, but are you also a visual person? Is there an image of this place?
Mm. Well, visually, I think I'm still like, since we went to the hammock, I'm on the hammock visually. I can
Mm,
visualize
yeah, nice, nice.
all of the beautiful things
Yeah,
happening around me there.
beautiful, beautiful. So maybe even just, capture one of those floating pieces. I have an image. I know my image is probably not your image, but maybe just capture one and hold it, and we can take that with us as we travel down to sympathetic and dorsal, a tangible reminder. You have a home in ventral. I like to tell everybody that everybody has a home in ventral. Right? Sometimes we don't visit it as often as we want, or it's harder to get to, but the pathway there is built into your biology, right? Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
nice. I get the swaying in the hammock too.
Mhm.
Love it. Yeah, yeah. So let's move down the ladder to sympathetic for a moment. We started to get to know sympathetic when we began because it was right here with us. How's it doing now?
As soon as you said sympathetic, I could feel my stomach activate. It had like a
Mm,
churning quality to it.
mm-hmm,
Uh,
mm-hmm.
And I think I told you this when we met before, but that is a place where I tend to easily fall into, is a
Yeah.
sympathetic place.
Yeah. So
Familiar.
it's interesting is we all have a home in ventral, and then I like to think we have a home away from home in one of the survival states. And when I was thinking about our work, I thought, oh, I think your home away from home is sympathetic, right? I think that's the place that tries to keep you safe in the world. It's trying so hard to serve your safety and survival. Yeah. Yeah. And at the moment it's doing it through a clenched stomach. And what else?
Tightness in my chest right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's shortening my breath just a little bit. I can't breathe quite as deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. So remember what do you call the cottonwood? Is it a seed pod, or what is it that you?
I don't know. Just like cottonwood pieces. I have no idea.
I know. Well, bring that image to mind, the cottonwood piece. And remember that it's right there with you, reminding you, a bit of ventral reminding you.
Yeah, I can breathe a little bit deeper into my belly when I have that.
Yeah. And then invite sympathetic to be there with you, with that piece of ventral. Just notice how it responds to seeing, oh, there is this other energy.
Yeah, I almost like feel myself getting a little bit sleepy as there's like a recognition that they both are with me.
Yeah, interesting. So they've begun to get to know each other, and you're recognizing, oh, both of these exist. Yeah. So I'm curious about the sleepiness. So I'm wondering whether we might just take a few steps down to that dorsal place, but make sure we take the cottonwood thing with us. That and before we do that, maybe let's go back to ventral for a moment and just rest there for a moment.
Yeah, sorry, my dog has realized that
I love it.
On the ladder and he wants to join.
Of course, he can help you come back up to that place of regulation. Yeah, I love it. What's his name?
His name is Beef because he looks like a cow.
Oh, Beef. Well, welcome, Beef. Thank you for being here, helping us regulate.
Thank you, Beef.
I imagine are you coming back to ventral because Beef is here?
Yes, I co-regulate with Beef quite often.
I love it.
He always has a sense. Do you want to come up? Why don't you go lay down? Go ahead, go lay down. It's okay.
He's fine, I promise. So are you feeling more of that ventral energy now? Yeah.
A little bit, yeah. I'm definitely more awake, which is wild.
And our nervous system states have protective actions they take, right? And sleepiness is one of them. Sleepiness usually comes from dorsal, which is why I'm curious about that dorsal experience coming in to intervene in some way. So we just wanted to anchor first in ventral again. So in the hammock, all the beautiful cottonwood things floating through the air. Just fill your system. Yeah. Yeah. And then as we're ready, let's move down. We'll go past sympathetic, right? And keep going down to that dorsal experience. Remembering we have a lifeline to ventral that's going with us. And let's just stop there for a moment and notice what happens here in dorsal.
I'm feeling this there's I almost envision it as like a black hole energy forming here, and I want to just curl
up into it. Yeah. So let's stay one step back from it and look at it. Right? Does that feel like a familiar hole?
Vaguely, but not in this very specific form. I don't know that I've ever really
visualized it that way. Yeah. So let's stand at the doorway and look at that black hole,
Mm.
and just invite it to tell you what it wants you to know right now. What is it wanting you to understand about it or hear about it?
Mm. I'm something about rest, like encouragement of rest.
Mm. Mm.
But
Okay.
I don't know that I don't always know how to rest. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Interesting. Because what's fascinating, because you got sleepy when sympathetic was feeling too much, right?
Mhm.
And now we've got this black hole that feels as if it has the energy of shutdown, but the words to you are words reminder or an invitation to rest,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is when ventral and dorsal work together, then we can really rest with safety,
Mm.
right?
Mhm.
But when dorsal is on its own, that rest becomes disconnect, collapse, right? And actually doesn't nourish us. It takes us out of the overwhelm of sympathetic, but it
Yeah.
doesn't feed us in any way.
Yeah.
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 But you heard this intention from your dorsal to remind you to rest, which is lovely.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm very familiar with the kind of just like collapse
Mhm.
state that
Mhm.
it can bring me to often.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I heard you mention something about how sleepiness is like a protection, and
Mhm.
that is one of my biggest hurdles when I go on meditation retreats every semester for my school, and I am constantly falling asleep on the cushion.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because it may be that because again, when ventral and dorsal can combine, you can go to that, you can meditate and really be present in your meditation,
mhm.
right? But when there's more dorsal and ventral is not able to hold on, we disconnect, we disappear, we float away, we're just not there or fall asleep, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, as a protective mechanism. Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious because we're this conference is about shame and also compassion, self-compassion. I'm curious if you wanted to share a bit about your nervous system experience of shame, not the actual events is fine, but how does your nervous system move into shame and then protect you from it? What happens?
Mm. Yeah, it was interesting. I had forgotten that you said that shame usually lives in the dorsal realm. And I had realized as I was doing my math that I wrote down shame is very present here. And then I heard you say it in the introduction, and I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so
I'm just looking at your map for a minute because here you said the world is empty and I am empty.
Mhm,
Right.
mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I can exactly answer what you were asking, but this is what's coming to me, so I'm just gonna say it. There's this like around the collapse feeling that I get in the dorsal is like this, you shouldn't be here. You should be able to like handle something else. When I'm on the cushion and I'm falling asleep, it's like you're not doing this right. Like
Right.
wake up. um And when I find myself like in a dorsal place, which often like it feels very like a depressive state
Yes.
for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just so many shoulds that come.
Yeah.
And
And those shoulds are all coming from your sympathetic nervous system.
when I was gonna say that like as I like if I really like feel into the shoulds, I can get back into like a sympathetic, like,
Right.
hey, it brings me back up.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but
I'm curious. Let's look at it again. Let's look at you're in this place where you're trying to meditate,
Mm-hmm.
and you are falling asleep,
Mm-hmm.
right? And from dorsal, if you went to that dorsal place again, what's the story here? What is dorsal telling you about meditation and what's happening?
So I don't know if this is what dorsal specifically is telling me, but what's coming up is this like, there's too much
Mhm.
and I have to move away from it.
Yeah, there's too much. I have to move away. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And then if we come to sympathetic, to that sympathetic energy that you were just talking about, the shoulds and the have tos, what does sympathetic say about that meditative experience?
Says you're not doing it right. You should be able to stay awake on your cushion. um,
Does it make a meaning about you?
yeah, that I don't I don't know if this is the meaning, but there's almost like you don't have the courage to like really
Yeah.
dive deep into it.
Yeah, right. So dorsal says it's overwhelming, too much. I have to get you out of here. And sympathetic says you don't have the courage to dive in.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So if we came for a moment to ventral, to that place of the hammock and the cottonwood things, come back there, anchor there,
Mm.
feel into that place. And what does ventral say about that meditative experience?
Says you're already doing it.
Well, you're already doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You're
I
already.
just think it's so fascinating to see how each state has a very different story.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when you're in sympathetic, the only story you can hear is all the shoulds, and you don't have the courage. And when you're in dorsal, the only story you can be in is overwhelmed, too much, have to get you out of here. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when we can come to ventral, we can have compassion for what's going on in sympathetic and dorsal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something that I really love about like when I'm in specifically sympathetic, I can
Mhm.
kind of pull myself out of dorsal a little bit more easily. When I'm in sympathetic, it's so overwhelming that I don't remember, I don't know that my home is in ventral.
Right.
And yeah, I'm just imagining like all of the times when I've just been so wildly overwhelmed. If I could have like held that cottonwood piece in my hand, maybe I could have
Mhm.
found a little bit of like air and
Yeah,
not
it
drown.
gives you a little space, little breathing room, a little perspective,
Yeah.
right? From ventral, we have perspective. From
Yeah.
sympathetic and dorsal, we're stuck in a survival story,
Hmm.
right? And your sympathetic system has been working for a long time on your behalf.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, yeah. And dorsal has been, holding all of these, moments of shame that can't be yet connected with safely, right? Yeah, yeah. So again, I'm just thinking about your system, and I just was wanting to send sympathetic and dorsal some gratitude, right? What would you want to tell dorsal?
Mm. Thank you for protecting me from myself sometimes.
Yeah, from the overwhelming
Yeah.
experience where there was no escape,
Hmm.
right? And so the escape was to, collapse, shut down, float away, disappear in
Hmm.
some way, right? Yeah,
Yeah. And I think, yeah, it's been necessary from time to time.
absolutely.
It's brought me to, even though, like you were saying, it's not really rest, like it's forced me into a place of at least shut down.
Right. It gets you out of the craziness of sympathetic.
Hmm.
Right. Because when we're in sympathetic, we long to come home to ventral, but we can't always get there. And so dorsal says, well, I'll take care of it.
Yeah.
I'll get you out of that craziness, the chaos of sympathetic. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, I have sympathetic can be really overwhelming, but it, like you were saying, it's my home away from home. So I'm very good at just moving through it. And so dorsal is like a reminder of like, whoa, you are still, you're still in
Right.
sympathetic.
Right. You're still being depleted in sympathetic rather than nourished in ventral.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And in ventral, you have access to these lovely capacities you put on your map. You know, you're in your body easily. You can be in your body without creating stories. You move through emotions with awareness. You walk, read, do yoga, eat well, participate. Those are all the ways that you can engage with the world. And
Mhm.
from that place, be able to engage with your sympathetic home away from home and your dorsal shame places differently. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's
Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, I definitely like I can still touch those places when I'm in ventral, but they're
Right.
not overwhelming.
Right. And that's the key to processing, you know, or to, you know, whatever word we want to use, being with, being informed by, digesting, whatever the language is, the places where our trauma moments and our trauma stories are stored, because they're stored in sympathetic and dorsal. They're not stored in ventral. In ventral, we can be with them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
From that ventral place, we can take one of those cottonwood things with us.
Mhm.
Let's do that right now again. Let's make that trek again. We're going to really walk this pathway so your system remembers, oh, I know how to do this. And let's walk down to sympathetic and bring that cottonwood thing. And maybe you want to bring a basket full. Maybe sympathetic needs a bit more than one. I don't know. We have as much as we need, though. It's a lovely thing of ventral. There's as much as we need. And as you visit sympathetic with the cottonwood things with you,
Mhm.
just invite sympathetic in. Let it know it's welcome.
Yeah, there's a bit of a clench like in my stomach again.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and there's like tingling in my face, but it doesn't feel quite. I can still take some.
It's not as intense as it was a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ask sympathetic if it stopped sending you all the shoulds and the have tos and the self-critical voices, if it stopped doing that, what is it afraid might happen? What's the worst thing that it's trying to protect you from?
It's trying to protect me from like just fully collapsing.
Mm, yeah.
Also, I think being abandoned by everyone that I know.
Yeah. So it makes sense that it's going to not let go easily, right? Because it's serving your safety.
Yeah.
If it stopped doing this, you would fall to dorsal, give up, despair, and be abandoned.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So let's ask it the question again in a different way and ask it if it could relax just a little and allow a little more of this ventral cottonwood energy in. What positive thing does it think might happen?
I could be in better connection with myself.
Mhm.
So it's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. So it has that knowing.
Mhm.
It hasn't yet had enough connection with the ventral energy to begin to trust that ventral can really do this, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So go back up to ventral for a moment into that hammock and the beautiful cottonwood things blowing in the air. and invite some of that sympathetic, overwhelming energy to dip a toe into that ventral place with you. Let it see what it's like there, what it feels like.
I mean, you said this before, but it's exactly what's coming up. There's just like a broadening of perspective up here.
Nice,
Things are not nearly as dire.
nice,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah. So we wanted to do it this way. We wanted to invite sympathetic up. We've brought ventral down, then we wanted to invite sympathetic up,
Mhm.
right? Because both are possible for them to get to know they can work together. Yeah. Yeah. And then just see, would it be okay with your system if we went to dorsal and dipped a toe in some of the shame? What does your nervous system say?
Um, there was like a shot that like went up my center and into my heart.
Mhm.
I feel like a little bit of pain in my
Oh,
backside.
yeah. Your body's talking to you.
Yeah.
So you're the one who has to translate that and let your system know that it's fine to say no. We want to honor the wisdom of your nervous system. It's absolutely fine to say no. And if it says yes, it can say no at any time. And we're going to bring the cottonwood energy with us.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm just noticing it's so hard for me to listen to my nervous system for I've gotten really good at overriding it.
Oh, yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you and most of the world, I think we get good at overriding and especially if we grow up in environments that don't encourage us to listen in and follow,
Yeah.
which are most places.
Yeah.
You know, we listen in, but then we're told, oh, do this anyway.
Yeah.
All the shoulds, the sympathetic shoulds come,
Yeah.
right? So it doesn't surprise me that. So let's just take a moment and practice listening to your nervous system. Right? Just notice. It speaks to you through somatically, I think, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when we think about dipping into dorsal, and your nervous system sent you a lot of body somatic responses, what is it wanting you to know? Was that a no? Was that a be careful? Was it a maybe? What was it?
Yeah, I think it's a be careful. I'm
Mm.
noticing now as I sit here, there are like tears welling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a lot of sadness coming in.
Let's just sit with that sadness for a moment. Yeah. Again, remembering you've got ventral energy flowing through your system. Bring it to the sadness and listen. Listen to the sadness. See what it wants you to know.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, I don't know that I always like consciously go to a place of shame. It's usually just like happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and actually being resourced and moving towards that place, it's a reminder of how much shame lives within me and how
Yeah.
it's sad.
Yeah. So
And
it's
the
just
sadness isn't overwhelming. It's just
right,
here. Yeah.
just an acknowledgement. There's a lot of shame. Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's just acknowledge that and invite your dorsal state to send you any other messages it wants you to know.
Yeah. It's like don't get lost here.
Exactly. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah, because usually shame comes and grabs you and you're gone. And we're saying we're going to step towards mindfully.
Mhm.
And dorsal says, don't get lost here.
Mhm.
Right. So what do you want to tell dorsal? How do we not get lost? What's the difference? What do we need it to know?
And I have the cottonwood with me,
Mm.
and
Can it feel that? Can it feel the cottonwood energy? Is it able to feel that in any way? Yeah.
I think it's why I'm able to be like sad about it right now.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm yeah, I'm trying to like relay that I believe that I can touch it without getting.
Mm. Uh-huh. Yeah.
I have the ability to have space.
Yes. 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 Yeah. Do you want to experiment with that just a tiny bit?
Mhm.
Yeah. And just by moving a tiny step toward that shame energy that's held in there. Just a tiny step toward, and then a tiny step back. And I'm right here with my ventral energy to also help you. And just play with that, a tiny step toward, stop there for a moment, tiny step back. What happens? Mm.
It's mostly somatic again.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just was noticing as I like stepped forward into it, there was like a almost like phlegm was building in my head and like
Mm.
apathy and
Mhm.
yeah.
And then as you step back, what happened?
I it lifted just a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the experience we're wanting to move in a bit and then back, in a bit and back, because dorsal fears you get lost here.
Yeah.
So we want to really demonstrate to dorsal you can take a step in and take a step back. Yeah. So if it's okay, play with that one more time. Take a tiny step in. Just notice you step into the place where you feel this is the right distance. We don't want to override anything. Stop there for a moment, listen, and then move back out. Hmm. What happened this time?
there's like a bit of the shame, like almost grabbing my heart, is
Mm.
what it felt like.
Yeah, yeah. And when you stopped for a moment there and you felt that almost grabbing, were you able to hold on to your cottonwood thing and the ventral energy?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. And then you could step back.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we want to play at the edges, right? We don't want to just dive in because you know that experience well. You're good at that experience. We don't need to practice that one, right? We're trying to practice a tiny step in. The first time was just the lens in your face, and this time it was, oh, shame, a little grabbing at my heart. Did you go a little further this time?
Yeah, it felt like I did.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We go to the edge, we stretch to the edge, and then we come back, right? Just to the edge and back.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. So let's come all the way back up to ventral, to that hammock and the cottonwood floating through the air. Just take a moment and reflect on the journey you've been on.
Yeah, I can definitely feel the regulation, and I still feel like that dorsal energy is with me.
So let's be with that for a moment. Let's really anchor in the hammock and the cottonwood, and then bring that dorsal energy into that space with you. Let it be held in that energy of regulation. Just notice what happens.
There's like there's a bit of holding happening in my chest that feels
Mhm.
almost like I'm letting it in, but I'm not letting it in, you know?
A new experience, right? In, but I'm not really sure, right? I mean, sympathetic has a little anxiety about this,
Mhm.
right? Ventral is always going to welcome in, right? But sympathetic saying, "Ooh, I'm not sure,"
Mhm.
right? We're disrupting the way the system's organized, right? Which is a good thing and also, a scary thing.
Mhm.
What was the ventral experience to being welcomed in? The dorsal experience, what happened with dorsal? Was it willing to feel it for a bit?
Yeah, a little bit.
So let it know we're not asking it to change in any way, right? We're just offering it this energy, this place as a resource so that you can be with your dorsal experience differently. Mm,
I think it's such a different energy to come and be like, I'm not rejecting you, like I
exactly.
would
You're
do.
welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you've done a lot of work traveling down and up and down and up, and we're going to begin to bring it to a completion here together. But I wanted to see, what do you want to create to take away so that you can continue to make this journey and get to know What would be helpful?
I mean, definitely a reminder that my home is in ventral.
Mm-hmm. 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 What would, are you a affirmation person or a image illustration person? How would you want to have that reminder?
I think just knowing that I can always come back to that like very specific memory.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm. Yeah, the hammock, the cottonwood, that
yeah.
moment. Yeah,
Mm,
that moment is wired into your nervous system and is there for you whenever you want it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
mhm. And like as I have more moments of it, I can invite those to be.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. So if you checked in with your nervous system right now, anything still left that needs to be named or visited before we finish?
No, it's so interesting. I kind of feels like I can feel all three of them at play right now.
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
Um,
uh-huh. That's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like the dorsal energy is almost keeping me like a little bit grounded, but it's not to
Uh-huh,
the point where it's
uh-huh.
like taking me out of my experience right now.
Love it.
And the sympathetic feels like it's there to like jump in case
Uh-huh.
in
Uh,
case I go too deep.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we can just check with sympathetic and say, how did that go? You didn't have to jump in. We want your system to really recognize we honored what it said, where it invited us to go. We really were slow in the going, and that's the way forward.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that I want to carry with me is the honoring because it's so easy when I'm
Mm-hmm,
sympathetic
mm-hmm.
specifically and I'm overwhelmed by it. I'm like,
Yeah.
you get away.
Right.
And
Right. Yeah. So it's that notice it, name it,
yeah.
bring some of those cottonwood things with you as you turn toward it so that you can hear, oh, I get this feels too big and I'm now going to take a step back.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that you partner with sympathetic. Yeah. 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 Anything else you need before we make the turn to?
I think just an acknowledgement that the sadness is still there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. They can be with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that sadness is there in a way that you can be with it safely.
Yeah.
Right. That's your path forward. Sadness has a lot to tell you, and now it can because you can be with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You'll take that somewhere and begin to listen to it. Yeah, it's beautiful. Mm, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful journey.
Yeah.
Beautiful journey.
Thank you for taking me on it.
Mm, thanks for taking all of us on it. It was really lovely. And I wonder now again if we honor the wisdom of your system, what does it feel like for transitioning to this next segment? Do you want to hi Beef? Do you and Beef want to be in the background? Do you want to join in the Q&A? What feels right for you? And again, this is your system telling you. So
I think there's a desire to be a part of it, and also with the awareness that uh, I want to like acknowledge that I may not be able to answer every question or
beautiful.
yeah.
Beautiful. All right. All right, Chris, we are ready to have you join us. Hi there.
Hello. Thank you both for that journey. Carly, thank you so much for your courage and vulnerability. I don't know how we can applaud on Zoom. It's been 3 years on Zoom. I haven't quite figured out how to do it. I guess we can use our emojis, but thank you. That was really a brave thing to do and an honor for all of us. And I know I speak for myself. Boy, do I feel really nice right now. And also learned so much. And we're seeing pop up a lot of thank yous in the chat. So hopefully you can take that in. We've got a number of absolutely wonderful questions to start to shift through here. But Carly, I'm wondering if you had any comments you wanted to share with the larger group first, or Deb, if you did.
I'll let Carly go first if there's anything you want to say, or I can jump in. You tell me.
The only thing that I want to say is that I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to learn how to befriend my nervous system, and it's such a gift. Yeah, that's all.
I think the one of the fascinating parts for me is, we have places we want to go as therapists, right? Places we want to go. And Carly's system was so able to guide us in the speed of that, right? And so we really learn, we are going to build the capacity to enter into the place where shame is stored. And it's not going to happen today or tomorrow or next week or the next week. It's going to happen as that capacity and that trust that Carly won't get lost there begins to build. And I think that's such a great knowing. And it was such a beautiful expression of that. Her nervous system said very clearly, I'm afraid you'll get lost, right? Yeah.
And yeah, I'm looking at the chat; it's just blowing up. So please take this in when you've got 832 nervous systems that I think want to be friends with each of you. But please take that in on a hard day and save that. So some questions that come through. Let's see. People are, a lot of people are saying thank you. Some questions about parallels. Someone asking, is there some parallels or equivalent with self-energy and IFS or with other models of healing that you can think of? Open window of tolerance or other kinds
Absolutely.
of parallels?
Yes. Yeah. I think, ventral is the biological name for any of those. It's the biology behind self. If you're an IFS practitioner, or Dan Siegel's window of tolerance, the window is the ventral state. And as we create more capacity to anchor in ventral, the window widens. So yes, and whatever model of therapy you practice, you are working with your client's nervous system. So understanding the necessity to have ventral active and alive and online in your work is so important, right? Whatever your model of therapy might call that.
Some folks are wondering, what if there's never been much of a safe connection or safe place to go back to? How do we heal that? How do we work with that?
Yeah. And I think, that's why I always tell people everyone has a home in ventral, right? And when I said that to Carly, it landed in her system in a really lovely way, right? It's just a different way of saying your biology has this ventral place that you may not have visited very often, but in reality, everybody has a micro moment, a glimmer moment regularly. And a glimmer is all we need. Right. And, I would have clients who would say, I don't know this place. And I'd say, right, but we're going to look for that moment in our work together and we're going to name it. And we would have a moment of feeling that attunement. And I'd say, oh, I think that's ventral for you. And a client would, frequently say, oh, that's it. It feels too weird. I can't stay there. Say, of course not. Your nervous system's not familiar with that. But it visits those places. So I encourage people to look for the glimmers. And when we're working with our clients, find that glimmer moment in the work, right? And often it is this place where my client and I are in this place of I call it autonomic intimacy. We're in this place of connection, this co-regulating place that is very unfamiliar. We are often the first predictable, regulated being in our clients' lives. And we use that to say, this is ventral coming alive. So look for those moments and then help your clients look for a glimmer, because they will find it. They will find it. And to let them know that finding that glimmer moment does not in any way discount or discredit or disavow all of the trauma that they're living in. It's just a knowing that the nervous system can do both. And in fact, has this place wired in, waiting for you to access as a resource so you can work with the trauma. That's what I would say. What would you say, Carly? But how did that land for you when I said you have a home in ventral? What happened?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think it was just like a nice reminder that like I can tap into it when I feel the overwhelm of the sympathetic specifically. And I like, even I don't know, I have all of these like tools, right, that I have that I can like help regulate. And at the end of the day, I just think even just sitting and visualizing was a reminder that like, oh, I don't have to like seek it externally. It's here in me. I can grasp it at any moment that I need to. It's not something that like, yeah. Tools are helpful, but it's here. It's always here.
Yeah. I like to tell people that I really do believe your nervous system inherently longs to be in ventral and knows how to get there. Right? Knows how to get there. So yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of folks resonating with the word glimmer, which Deb, I know you and I have discussed. I just love this idea so much. People even have a little glimmer emoji I see, which I love.
Yes, I love it.
I need that on my phone. Send people glimmers. It's such a wonderful image and resonates so much for so many people. It's sort of this like opposite of a trigger or something. And as you were mentioning, sort of regulation and co-regulation, connecting what we're doing, what we're helping with our clients. Someone's asking, is this vibes? When you say like I get good vibes, like is something happening at the nervous system level? Can we say that?
Yeah, vibes is interesting. It's I love energy, so I think we're sharing energy back and forth. I think there is incredible power in ventral. I talk about it as being contagious in all the good ways. That when I am anchored in ventral, I then, through neuroception, am sending out to every nervous system around me cues of welcome, cues that there is safety in the world, that I am safe and that they can connect. And as that goes down into the world, other nervous systems begin to take that in. Right. And I think it's a ripple effect. So, vibes is an interesting thing to think about it. I think it's the contagious energy of a regulated nervous system. We do know that, nervous system to nervous system, we're all linked. Right. That, that through this nervous system communication, we are all linked. And I like to imagine this, all around the world, every nervous system is linked. Right. And so if we have, if we are in ventral, we're starting the chain of ventral, right? The same is true, though, if we're in sympathetic or dorsal. We are then putting out to other nervous systems that there's danger in the world, that we're unsafe or we're, not here, not present. So I do think, and I think if you, begin to play with this in groups, you begin to see ventral spreading and nervous systems coming to regulation together.
Yeah. And this idea that we keep learning about more and more about emotional contagion, about the way our mirror neurons work, about these unconscious ways our nervous systems are communicating. And I think Polyvagal brings so much of this in and then helps other people regulate, regulate through their shame. I mean, it's such a beautiful way of putting it. Which kind of, another question that kind of comes up in terms of, in some ways, the opposite. Someone's asking, if you're dysregulated all the time, for whatever reason that might be, trauma, organic reasons, who knows what, is there sort of a feedback loop? Is this why this person's asking? Is that why people might act nasty toward you? But is there a negative feedback loop in some way that happens too when we're dysregulated? Can you say something about that? And
Yeah.
maybe also, how can we work with that without shaming people and sort of like, it's your fault because you're dysregulated, so you're inviting that, like, how can we language that with our clients in a way that's non-shaming?
Yeah. So the feedback loop, yes. And we want to, in a scientific world, which I dip a toe in, try to, not fully, but even the increasing negative experience, the increased sympathetic activation, or the increased dive into dorsal would be a positive feedback loop, because what it means is it's not interrupted, so it just keeps going and going. So even those things we think of as dysregulating survival are positive feedback loops. And what we want to do with someone, a client, a loved one, a friend, whoever, who is stuck in dysregulation, I like to think, I look across at that person and I look at them as really dysregulated. My brain puts a lot of labels on people. They're angry, they're dangerous, they're needy, they're always or never, whatever that is. But that's my brain trying to make sense of a dysregulated nervous system. So if I can look across and say, oh, really dysregulated. And the best thing I can do is to stay anchored in ventral and keep sending ventral experiences, be in a ventral way of being with that person, right? Because I can't pull them out of the dysregulation they're in. I can offer my regulated presence as a cue, as an energy that they can begin to connect with, right? And there are some beings in the world who are so dysregulated and cannot find enough ventral to begin to come into that place at the moment. Yet's one of my favorite words, right? They can't do it yet, right? As long as I put yet there, then I can have some hope, right? But there are people who are intensely dysregulated and, living in dangerous worlds and being activated by a neuroception of danger all the time. And that is really hard to send, a cue of safety into, right? So, when I worked with clients who were still living in dangerous situations, we would notice there's a moment of safety. And one of the worries they had was, does that mean I'm going to not be able to protect myself when I go back out into the world? Right? And I say, no, your nervous system knows how to do that beautifully. It's going to go right back to doing what it knows how to do. But in this space, in this moment, we can be safe together. And again, it's those micro moments that we're looking for.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's so empowering and hopeful to shift into that yet mindset, the sort of Carol Dweck kind of stuff, or it also reminds me of a lot of acceptance and commitment therapy, and defusing from our thoughts and opening to new possibility in so many ways, and shifting out of that narrative. So thank you for sharing that too. It's just an empowering message. And along with this dysregulation, co-regulation, someone's asking about thinking about culture, organizations, systems. Thanks so much for giving us the gift of understanding polyvagal theory and its application, which is true. You're giving us the understanding of it, because it sounds so complicated. That is truly a gift, Deb.
Well, but now you guys all have to go do something. Right? I mean,
you give us that cheat sheet.
Yeah, I mean, this is I often say, this is the responsibility of being polyvagal informed. I now have a responsibility to move through the world in a certain way. And I feel sometimes it feels like a burden to begin to help systems change, because systems are pretty dysregulated systems, right? The world is in a pretty dysregulated place. We've got huge groups of people in organizations, in the medical world, in schools, that are acting out of a sympathetic drivenness, right? I'm driven. I'm always seeking, but I can never be satisfied, right? Or another huge group that has gone to the dorsal, despair, give up. It's hopeless, right? And as long as we have those groups with not enough ventral active and alive, nothing can change. So again, we do need to change systems. And, sometimes I come back to, because I work with a lot of systems, then it can be incredibly overwhelming, right? To see no change. First of all, we have to measure tiny change, which we don't do well, but let's do that. And secondly, when I'm overwhelmed, I come back to here. If I can stay regulated, I can then begin to impact the people in those systems by simply being regulated and giving them a moment of feeling like what it is to be in connection with a regulated being, and then invite them to consider how might that change what you do, right? How might they change how you run your business, right?
Be the regulation you wish to see in the world.
Exactly. Change the world one nervous system at a time, right?
Absolutely.
Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we think about schools and we expect
Yeah.
kids to fit into a system when their nervous systems are not ready, and their nervous systems are all organized differently. And why would we think that 30 nervous systems can do the same thing at the same time? It's a crazy thing to think, right? And it's just crazy, So yeah. So yes, you all now have a responsibility.
With great power comes great responsibility.
There is, I think of ventral as an unstoppable force. There is great power in coming to that place of ventral, because there I can be compassionate. And remember, I have no access to compassion when I am in a survival state. Not because I no longer want to be compassionate, but my biology will not allow it.
Right. Yeah.
So if we talk about compassion, self-compassion, there is incredible reason to be able to come to ventral, because then you can access self-compassion, compassion.
Yeah. Lydia Zylowska has a question. Lydia, I quoted you last week, by the way, so it's fun to see your name pop up. What do you make of the sadness that came up with acknowledging the sympathetic nervous system, almost as if an acknowledgement, its wisdom and safety brings sadness?
Yeah, I think the sadness was interesting, and we can ask Carly about it as well. But for me, the sadness felt like a ventral experience, right? The neuroception was one of feeling safe enough to connect with the sadness. It didn't overwhelm. It informed. It brought something up in a way that was safe enough to have it. How about you, Carly?
Yeah, I agree. I think what was happening, I often am like living in my intellectual world, and I can very easily be like, wow, it's really a shame that you're so hard on yourself and that you feel so much shame and that there's like this critical voice. But the sadness was actually like, as I was stepping toward it, it was less up here and just more of like a recognition was what it felt like was happening. And it didn't overwhelm, and it was loving. It was a loving sadness to tap into, was what it felt like.
Yeah, it was beautiful. So, really held in ventral. And I think that's the wonderful thing about looking at things that way. It's not sadness or anger or, anxiety, or that's just a label. It's what state is holding that. Where is it emerging from? So that was sadness that was emerging in a new way, and you could really be with it. And I think that it was really touching. Yeah.
What are any particular, as we're kind of running down on only about 5 or 6 minutes left, but tips, strategies for how to self-regulate, how to install glimmers around us and in the world around us or in our lives?
Love it. So first of all, I would invite everyone who is on this journey with us in this conference to fill out their personal profile map, right? And then find someone to share it with, right? Because first is the understanding it for myself, but second is to share it with someone, co-regulate with someone. So you might have someone in your life who would like to do it with you, because that becomes the first befriending step, right? Is to understand how my nervous system operates in these 3 states. And then once you've done that answers the question, where am I? Which is the first question we need to know. Where am I on my map right now? Because then I can begin to bring in some resources. If I'm in sympathetic, what can I do that might organize some of that chaotic flood of energy? If I'm in dorsal, what might I do to just bring in a gentle bit of energy to return some energy? And if I'm ventral, let's not forget that. If I'm in ventral, how do I celebrate that? Because we want to celebrate being in that place, right? And then glimmers. I love that glimmers came up. Glimmers have been the most requested thing from me over the past 6 months. It's like the world needs glimmers for some reason. I
It
love it.
does. It does.
It does, doesn't it? And I love it especially because it's a both and, right?
Yes.
It's not an either or. We have glimmers and we have all this other, but we need glimmers. And so, there's a very simple practice. Notice, how do you notice that a glimmer has appeared for you, right? You might have a feeling, you might have a thought, you might have emotion. I often go, oh, glimmer. My sister's, oh, glimmer, right? So notice how you know one has appeared, and then stop for a moment and appreciate it. So it's see, stop, appreciate. Very simple. See it, stop for a moment, appreciate it, right? And then go on with your day. And then if you really want to bring in that co-regulating principle of polyvagal theory, find a glimmer buddy or make a glimmer group, right? So that, I have people that I'll just say, oh, glimmer for the day, and I just send it off in a text. And then somebody else gets it and they go, oh, here's mine, right? It's in the sharing. So glimmer buddies, glimmer groups, please. There you go.
You got 830 glimmer buddies, I think, watching, and then thousands more
Hey.
watching this not live.
I really see it, stop, and appreciate. That's all we need to do.
Lovely. This is kind of an interesting question. Someone's asking, can anger, or what we think of as like negative or maybe less pleasant emotions, can they pull us out of dorsal? Is there a way to do that safely?
Yeah. So yes, what happens? Sympathetic anger activates to pull you out of dorsal. The problem being that it then puts you into the angry survival state, and it doesn't get you to ventral, right? The other pathway out of dorsal is to bring a bit of, I do this a lot, a bit of, gentle motion or gentle connection. If I'm in dorsal, Chris, I just want you to recognize I'm in dorsal and say, I'm just here with you. Don't ask anything of me, but I'm no longer alone, right? I'm seen, I'm not abandoned. That's what my system needs. And that way I begin to feel some energy come back and I end up in ventral. Right. So yes, what happens though, and what Carly was talking about, is sympathetic comes to pull you out of the dorsal despair, but it lands you in sympathetic survival.
Right. Absolutely. And yet there also probably is some way that a desire for justice can kind of get us into a place where we're actually able to activate and make some change in the world, or the way anger or frustration can remind us that a change needs to happen without it tipping into another dangerous, unhelpful. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that, ventral, the range of ventral, because we can have a lot of sympathetic mobilizing energy under the ventral umbrella and still be in that neuroception of safety. And we can stand up for what we believe in. We can take actions for change. We can stand up for others. I can say what I need. I can set boundaries. But when I do it from ventral, I'm not automatically seen as a cue of danger to the other people, right? So that's how we create change. Change happens from that place.
Yeah. So, do we have time for one more? Or are we about at our time, Kaylee?
Oh, we could do one more. One closing.
All right. Cool. I guess clients who struggle maybe with feeling safe in their bodies, feeling able to check in with their bodies, how do we work with that? How do we help them?
Yeah. So Carly was great because she's very somatically attuned, right? And so it was lovely to feel all the ways, the body was giving messages. For most of my clients, and I will say for myself, that is not my go-to pathway, right? I am much more, I'll look at my behaviors to get my clues, or my thoughts, right? Because I have an active thought process going on. I love words and they come all the time. So, if your client is not somatically, not body oriented, start with the other ways. On the personal profile map, we identify what happens in our body, but also what do we think, feel, and do in those states. And the think, feel, and do are the other portals in, right? And the body will come along later. So not to worry, you can get to understanding where your nervous system is and what it's doing through those other pathways.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you, Deb. I want to thank you, Carly, Awake Network. And I want to thank everybody here watching who I know is out there doing tremendously difficult work at a tremendously difficult time. And I know we all hope this has been of value too. I know I've learned so much today. So thank you all.
Thank you, Deb, Chris, and Carly so much. I just have a few closing announcements. I'm seeing a lot of questions come in around how to access the map. And so we have a link for that on the page where you accessed this video. And so if you go back to that page, you'll be able to find it there and it will be living there. We're also getting a lot of enthusiasm and questions about the model and wanting to know different techniques. And so we'll make sure to put some of the definitions for the dorsal, sympathetic, and ventral on the site. And also we're going to link to Deb and Chris's session from last year's Compassion in Therapy Summit, where they go really in depth into those concepts and also into some actual practices for therapists calming their own nervous systems before a session. So I think that'll be a great resource for folks who want to go deeper. And I also wanted to ask Deb before we close, folks are asking about how to go deeper with learning about polyvagal and also if there's ways to find specifically polyvagal therapists. And so I just wanted to see if there's any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so far there's no way there's no list of polyvagal guided therapists. And what I've asked clinicians to do is, if you've completed any of my training programs, to put on your profile that you use polyvagal theory, you're polyvagal informed. And if you are searching for a therapist, I always invite clients to say to their therapist, do you use polyvagal theory? Have you studied it? What do you do? That's the best way, I think, of getting there. So yeah, and I'm always trying to create new workshops and new offerings so people can come to the website and see what's happening is probably the best way to find what I'm doing in the world. So, but yeah, if you're looking for a therapist, ask them, are you polyvagal guided? Right? And have that conversation. Yeah.
Fantastic. We'll have the links to Deb's website under this video on the page. Maybe the team might also be able to chat it in now as we're closing. And finally, we're also getting questions about where this recording will be posted. It'll be posted on the same page where you accessed the video, and it'll be up for the next 48 hours. Thank you for everyone for joining, and for Carly, Deb, and Chris, and look forward to seeing you all for the rest of